Good morning. So I was asked to do a video about our most recent HearthCraft meeting that we had last Friday. I was going to do a video recording of the meeting itself while we were doing the meeting and completely forgot to do so. So I just wanted to go over what it was that we talked about and a little bit about what the craft entails in case you want to do it on your own at home. So the theme for May's HearthCraft was garden safety and spiritual safety. And the reason I chose that theme, well, myself and mom, because we were working on this one together, chose that theme because as we come out from our winter restorative time frame and into spring, we emerge not only spiritually, but also into our gardens to do a lot of gardening work. A lot of the people that I know who have earth-based spiritual paths, or even just earth-based philosophies, they have a garden. They get outside every spring and they start tilling soil. And this particular spring, we're running a little warm, so it actually feels more like summer for this video than springtime. But I wanted to go over just the basics of garden safety and then equate that to a spiritual safety component so that as we work in the garden and we encounter these things, we're reminded of the spiritual components of being safe as we emerge, and start interacting with other people and start interacting with their energy and kind of getting out of our shell a little bit. So I'm going to go over a few of the garden safety tips and what they equate to as far as spiritual safety, and then I'll go over what it is that we planned for our craft for the day. So um, when I talk about garden safety, I look at a myriad of things, and so we're going to go through quite a few of them. I think there's 10 on my list here. For slips, trips, falls, pathway hazards like uneven gravel or uneven paving stones, or even something as simple as being able to recognize path from non-path as far as having some sort of contrast color to differentiate it, or stonework or brickwork to differentiate it. Um, Having to do with just basically keeping mindful of what's in your path as you're traveling through your garden. I equated that to complacent and unprotected practice spiritually. As we do things, we become more familiar with them. As we have, positive consequences for our energy work, we become accustomed to the idea that the only time that anything bad would happen is if things just go wrong. Well, complacency can make it so that your practice is just not that great, and it can lend you into falling into a trap of some kind, or in this case, a trip, where you can, forget to shield yourself, forget to call your quarters if that's a necessary component. Um, you can become complacent about leaving your tools out. It's just a whole lot of familiarity of your space. And so you want to be mindful as you enter into more spiritual areas to shield up. If you're doing practice, make sure you follow the steps. Review your rituals before you do them so that you know what you're getting into. The next one on my list is cuts and lacerations. Working out in the garden, you're often around sharp hazards, and I equated that one to boundary breaches. So energetic boundaries exist for a reason. When we do things like hexes and bindings, or if we have too porous of boundaries ourselves, we risk having that negative backlash come back that comes from basically breaking someone else's boundary without their consent. So be mindful of that. The next one that I have is tetanus. And tetanus is a bacteria that lives in soil. It often is accumulated on rusty things, and so we equate it with rust, but it doesn't have to have rust to be there. And it doesn't always have to have something metallic to be there. It just lives in the soil. So being aware of that. And I equated that to spiritual residue. So if you're using tools that you've purchased somewhere and you don't know where they've come from, or you've gotten them secondhand and you haven't cleaned them, or if you're using old practices that maybe they're hanging on to some cultural components that you don't believe in anymore, maybe they're a little bit more on the divisive side, review those. Decide whether or not you want to enter that bacteria into your system. The next one that I've got here are toxic or irritating plants. So they may be very beautiful, but if they're toxic in our garden, that might not necessarily have the impact that we want to see. And so I equated that to influences that are beautiful but potentially harmful. So we see a lot of witch talk, and we see a lot of, friends and other spiritual groups, and they have their own practices and their own ways of doing things. And sometimes they're all for show and they have no practical purpose whatsoever. And even worse, sometimes that practical purpose is a negative one. Sometimes that person who is trying to influence you on witch talk is really just trying to sell some shit, and nothing that they're doing energetically actually aligns with you. Sometimes, you may see a group that is meeting together and they look amazing. They've got their shit all together. But then when you start practicing with them, you realize that they're all catty and they're fighting with one another. These are beautiful but toxic situations. Another one that I've got on here is heat or sun exposure, and making sure that you have shade structures and seating around your garden so that you're not burning out. And I equated that to spiritual burnout. So that has to do with not taking enough time in between doing your practices or taking on too many responsibilities for others spiritually that you may not be getting anything out of. Now, granted, this is a reciprocal existence. We are souls that are giving and we are souls that are taking. What I'm talking about is the burnout that comes from giving too much and not getting anything back, or not taking the time to recover yourself. The next one that I have is insect bites and or ticks, and I equated that to energy parasites. You may have also heard the term psychic vampires for this one. This is folks, people, or entities or situations that drain you. Very similar to that burnout, except for this isn't necessarily you exerting yourself. This is simply just being in the presence of someone who's pulling from you constantly. So be aware. When you come back in from working in the garden, you check yourself over for bites and for ticks. So when you come back into the end of your day, and this advice comes straight from one of our members, Ren, that you need to shake off the energy that isn't yours and draw back your energy into yourself so that you're not sitting there giving someone else something away for free that you don't even realize you're doing. Another one that I've got in here is repetitive strain. And I've also included in that tools that help enhance your grip while you're working with your tools, and then also seating in addition to the one for sun and heat exposure. And repetitive strain often comes with when you're working in the garden, you have a big part of the garden project that you need to do, and you just want to power through. And say you're cutting back blackberries, and you're just going and you're snipping, and you've got the cutters, and you're going to town, and the next thing you know, 2 hours has passed, and your shoulders are stiff, and your arms are sore, and guess how you're going to feel tomorrow? So in that repetitive motion, you need to build in breaks, and that's one of the reasons why I put the seating in here. And then also, when you're doing that repetitive motion, the tools that you're using, adapt those and accommodate those to make them yours so that you don't have to strain yourself in order to use them. And I equate this to rigidity in spiritual practice. So you need to maintain flexibility and resilience and be aware of the fact that your practice can use some refreshers from time to time. Don't just continue to do the same thing and box yourself in over and over again. Make sure that you're trying out new stuff. You never know what might actually resonate with you as you grow and change. The next one that I've got on here is allergic reactions. Now, one would hope that if you have a garden full of plants that you're not going to plant something in there that you're allergic to, but sometimes you inherit a garden. Sometimes you don't know that you're allergic. Sometimes an allergy develops later in life. These are all situations where you may be encountering a plant that you're allergic to in your own garden. And I equated this one to spiritual incompatibility. The thing with an allergy is that that plant or that item that you're allergic to is just living, it's just existing, it's just hanging out doing its own thing. Incompatibility is much the same way. A person can be spiritually incompatible with you, a group can be spiritually incompatible with you, a practice or a tool or a way may be spiritually incompatible for you. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that it doesn't resonate with you. If you notice that that's happening, wish it its best life and move on. Try something else anew. That goes back to that rigidity and practice one. Another one that I've got in here is mobility accessibility, specifically in the idea of having raised beds that are lifted up off the ground as opposed to raised beds that are just partially off the ground. Though the latter are also better for making it so that you have accessibility and mobility. But those raised beds that have a space underneath them for you to put a chair or a wheelchair, They also lift those things up to around waist height to make it easier for you to do the work that you're trying to do. And I equated that to building altar spaces for your practice that work for you. Now, I've been a renter my entire adult life. My altar spaces have never been able to be built into the building where I live. They've never been able to meet the needs that I have as far as copious amounts of, shelving for my books and, dangly things from the ceiling, and that's okay. I don't need to have some big gaudy altar space. And to the same extent, if it didn't work for me, for any other reason, maybe the space that I do have is too small, maybe the space that I have is very large and I need to kind of make my altar space one little section of a room that's much larger and dealing with some other stuff, whatever the case may be, adapting your altar space to meet your needs is in the same way, the same type of accommodation as adopting the methods for you to be able to be mobile around your raised beds and your garden in general. Don't be afraid to do what you need to be able to access what you need. Um, the second to last one that I've got here is just dealing with heavy lifting, especially hoses. That was the first thing that mom brought up that I said, oh, yeah, that's right. Those older hoses are very heavy. But that goes for anything that's in your garden. You want to make sure that you're not trying to lug around things that are too cumbersome for you. You can definitely hurt yourself in a whole slew of ways, shoulders, back, arms, the whole nine. And so you want to make sure that whatever you bring into your garden is going to work for you and your physical abilities. And I equated that one to emotional, spiritual burdens that aren't yours to carry. This happens a lot with people that are spiritually healers, people that are energetically capable of helping others guide themselves through healing the energy that they have seen a misalignment with. Oftentimes, healers will not put boundaries in place or they will take on more than they are capable of handling when they are working to heal others. You have to be mindful, just be aware of the load that you're carrying. You don't have to avoid carrying it entirely. Just know your own means and your own limits. And then lastly, and this was a very interesting one, making your garden accommodated to your visual and potential sensory limitations. And so this one was really looked up in the regard of visual disability specifically, and having points in your garden that are landmarked by either sound or by scent so that you know where you are in your garden. Now, this is not just something that we need to concern ourselves with as far as visual disabilities, but having landmarks in our garden to be able to orient ourselves for our spiritual practice is also great too. Having cardinal points so you know where you're headed is an effective method. And I've even known some folks that put miniature altars out in their gardens in each cardinal spot. And so the equation that I have for that one is practices that involve all of your senses. And so having a garden that involves all of your senses allows for you to utilize all of those senses if you have one that may not be as strong as the others. But in the same way, a ritual practice that allows for you to have all of your senses involved engages your entire brain with that practice, and you end up with better spiritual work as a result. So those are the equated garden safety and health concerns, and then spiritual safety and health concerns that I have there. So the next time that you're out in the garden and you're thinking, holy cow, I forgot to bring out a bottle of water, and geez, my sun hat is all the way in the house, you can think about, oh yeah, spiritual burnout. I should probably avoid that. But the craft that we had designed was actually making a spiritual first aid kit. And the point of this craft is to be able to have something that you can place in your pocket and take with you as you're out and about. You can put it in a purse, you can put it in a pocket. Even if you're good enough and you pick the right things, you might be able to stick it in a wallet so that you have a spiritual first aid kit there just to pull out and remind you in your day-to-day life that you're a spiritual being that's having a physical experience, and to remind yourself of the ways to take care of yourself and your spiritual energy as you move out into the world and you emerge from the wintering and into the springtime and onward into summer. And for this craft, you're going to want to look up comforting items for yourself and protective items to put into a little satchel that you put into your pocket. And so that's what I've got for you for this hearth craft. Join me next month in June. I put that date into the chat. I believe it's June 19th. But thank you so much, and I will see you then, hopefully.